Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we get straight to the heart of complex subjects. Today we're diving into a life just packed with contradictions. Lucius Annaeus Seneca.
Absolutely. Seneca is this fascinating figure because, well, he represents this huge gap between high-minded philosophy and the messy reality of power.
Right, he's writing these incredibly influential Stoic works, essays, letters, all about detachment, managing your emotions, even voluntary poverty.
And at the same time, he's incredibly rich, probably one of the richest men in the Roman Empire, and he's the chief advisor, the right-hand man to Emperor Nero.
Yeah, the Nero, one of history's most infamous tyrants.
So how do you square that circle? That's what makes him so relevant, I think, especially for you listening, trying to apply wisdom in, well, a complicated world.
Definitely. He preached that, your roof could be straw or gold. It doesn't matter for your inner self.
But his roof was definitely metaphorical gold, wasn't it? He had vast estates, huge amounts of money lent out at interest, all while serving in this incredibly dangerous, morally gray political arena. So our mission today is really to explore that turbulence. We're looking at his political career, the compromises he clearly made, but also the philosophical tools he developed, maybe because of those pressures.
And we have quite a bit to draw on his own writings, like the moral letters or his essay on anger, historical accounts of his time with Nero, his eventual downfall.
It paints a really vivid picture.
Okay, so to really get into his rise to power under Nero, we actually need to start with the fall, right? His exile.
That's right. Before he was Nero's powerful advisor, he spent 8 years banished, sent away to Corsica, this pretty rugged and isolated island.
And this was around AD 41, under the previous emperor, Claudius.
Yes, though the order came effectively from Claudius's wife Messalina. The official charge, or the alleged reason, was adultery with Caligula's sister, Julia Littula. Whether that was true or just a political pretext, who knows? But the effect was devastating for Seneca.
I can imagine. A man of his intellect, his ambition, suddenly cut off from Rome, from the Senate, from everything.
Exactly. It was a profound shock and, frankly, a humiliation. You can see the anguish in some of his writings from that time, even if they're also, shall we say, heavy on the flattery towards Claudius, hoping for a recall.
Trying to get back in favor. It shows that dependence on external factors, the very thing Stoicism tries to guard against.
Precisely. And then his luck changes dramatically. Around AD 49, he's recalled.
Why then? What shifted?
Messalina was gone, executed. Claudius had remarried to Agrippina the Younger, and she was the one who engineered Seneca's return.
Ah, Agrippina, Nero's mother. So she brings Seneca back.
And almost immediately gives him this pivotal role, tutor to her young son, Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, the boy who would become Nero.
So from disgraced exile to imperial tutor, that's quite the turnaround.
It really is. And then, just a few years later, AD 54, Claudius dies poisoned, most historians suspect, by Agrippina.
And her son Nero becomes emperor. He's only, 16 or 17?
Exactly. And suddenly, Seneca isn't just a tutor anymore. He, along with Afranius Burrus, the new prefect of the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's bodyguards, they effectively become the ones running the show.
So for the next decade, roughly, the fate of the Roman Empire rests on the shoulders of this philosopher and this military man trying to manage a teenage emperor.
That's the setup. A philosopher who just came back from political oblivion, now trying to steer the ship of state. It's an extraordinary situation.
Okay, let's talk about those early years.
Yeah.
The sources often refer to them quite positively, don't they? The Quinquennium Neronis.
Yes, the 5 good years. Generally, the first 5 years or so of Nero's reign are seen as a period of relatively stable and competent government. There was moderation, sensible policies, a deliberate attempt to move away from the perceived abuses under Claudius.
And the credit for that stability usually goes to Seneca and Burrus.
Largely, yes. They seem to work well together, Burrus handling the military and administrative side, Seneca the, let's say, political strategy and rhetoric. But it wasn't easy. It was a constant balancing act.
Especially with Nero's mother, Agrippina, right? She wasn't planning on just fading into the background.
Not at all. She saw herself as the real power behind the throne. She'd orchestrated Nero's rise, gotten rid of rivals, and she expected to rule through him. She had old scores to settle from Claudius's time, and, as the sources say, she knew too much. She knew where the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively.
So right after Claudius dies, Seneca and Burrus have to step in to stop her from just, purging her enemy?
Pretty much. Agrippina wanted revenge, wanted to consolidate her power immediately. Seneca and Burrus had to restrain her, guide the young Nero towards a policy of clemency, or at least perceived clemency. It was about setting a different tone.
So they're trying to manage Nero, manage his mother, Quite the political tightrope.
And you see the tension immediately. Take the case of Narcissus. He was Claudius's incredibly powerful freedman, his chief secretary, hugely influential.
And Agrippina hated him.
Despised him. He was one of her prime targets. She basically forced him to commit suicide right after Claudius's death. This was exactly the kind of old-style, ruthless court politics, the Claudian tactics that Seneca wanted Nero to renounce.
But there was a strange twist there, wasn't there? Something about his property and papers.
Yes, it's a grim detail, but revealing. Narcissus was apparently allowed to pass his considerable wealth to his heirs. This was better than outright execution and confiscation.
Okay.
But the price seems to have been that he had to burn his private papers. Decades worth of potentially explosive documents about the inner workings of the imperial court.
Papers that could have implicated Agrippina or others.
Precisely. So it was a kind of negotiated elimination. Agrippina got rid of a rival, but Seneca and Burrus maybe managed to contain the fallout, prevent wider chaos, and crucially, use this moment. They used it to have Nero promise the Senate that the era of arbitrary power plays and backroom dealing was over. Seneca likely wrote the speech. It was all about projecting this image of a return to responsible traditional government under a thoughtful princeps, a first citizen.
So creating a facade of stability, even as the underlying tensions were immense.
That was the game. And for a few years, it largely worked. That's the golden period.
But inevitably, that control started to slip, didn't it, as Nero got older?
Yes, it couldn't last. Nero wasn't content being guided. His own personality started to dominate his artistic ambitions, his desire for popular acclaim, his growing impatience with advisors, and eventually his cruelty.
And Seneca's position became more precarious.
Absolutely. His immense wealth became a huge target. How could this philosopher writing about detachment and simplicity be so incredibly rich? Critics latched onto that. Was his stoicism just a hypocritical mask for greed and ambition?
That charge must have stung.
And politically, it weakened him. Plus, his relationship with Nero frayed. The breaking point seems to have involved Nero's personal life, clashing with what Seneca saw as the dignity, the gravitas of the imperial office.
You mean Nero wanting to divorce his wife Octavia?
Exactly. Octavia was the daughter of the previous emperor, Claudius. She represented continuity, tradition, Roman respectability. Seneca defended her, tried to uphold that traditional image of the principate.
But Nero was obsessed with another woman, Poppaea Sabina.
Yes. And he was determined to get rid of Octavia. By defending Octavia, Seneca put himself directly against Nero's desires.
And the sources put it quite starkly, saying Seneca ended up on the same side as the ghost of Agrippina.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? Agrippina, who Nero had recently murdered, had also in her own way represented certain traditions Seneca was now defending. By sticking to principles, Seneca was effectively siding with the memory of the mother Nero hated.
And the consequence.
Nero was finished listening. As the source says, he was done listening to his surrogate father as well. The bond was broken. Seneca had lost his influence because he was still trying to apply reason and restraint to a ruler who was rapidly abandoning both.
So what could he do? Did he just give up?
Not quite. He tried to salvage things, to stay in favor, perhaps hoping to still exert some minimal influence. And this is where it gets, well, uncomfortable. He resorted to flattery.
How so? What kind of flattery are we talking about?
Well, knowing Nero fancied himself an intellectual and an artist, Seneca dedicated works to him. His book Natural Questions, which is about meteorology, cosmology, that kind of thing, he sprinkled it with references designed to show amity and win a favor.
Trying to appeal to Nero's interests.
And then there's the poetry. Nero considered himself a great poet. Seneca, who was actually a very accomplished playwright and poet himself,
But had to tread carefully.
extremely carefully. Nero was apparently quite jealous of Seneca's literary talent, so Seneca made sure to praise Nero's efforts, probably quite excessively.
Okay, that's standard court politics maybe. But did it go further?
It seems so. The most damning example is how Seneca described Nero's character in writing. At a time when Nero's cruelty was becoming apparent, Seneca wrote that the emperor was a man passionately devoted to truth as he is to the other virtues.
Wow. That's hard to swallow.
Exactly. As the analysis we read notes, that phrase just drips with insincerity. It's a stark reminder of the compromises involved.
It really forces the question. Can you justify that level of falsehood, even if you believe you're doing it for a greater good, to maybe moderate a tyrant just a little bit?
That's the dilemma at the heart of Seneca's political life. From a purely practical standpoint, maybe he felt he had no choice. But it sits so uneasily with the philosophy he was writing. often at the very same time.
Right, so let's pivot to that philosophy. He's writing his famous moral letters to his friend Lucilius during this incredibly stressful period. How did Stoicism equip him, not just for life in general, but specifically for this life?
Well, the first key thing to understand is how Roman Stoicism, especially Seneca's version, was different from the earlier Greek Stoics.
Okay.
The Greeks often presented the ideal Stoic, the sage, as this almost superhuman figure, perfectly virtuous, completely unmoved by emotion, sort of aloof and emotionally detached.
Almost impossibly perfect.
Pretty much. Which, isn't very helpful for most people dealing with everyday life, let alone advising a volatile emperor. Seneca and other Roman Stoics made the sage ideal more relatable, more human. They acknowledged that even a wise person feels things, has physiological reactions, gets caught up in messy situations.
So less about achieving perfection, more about striving.
Exactly. That's the crucial concept of the progressor proficiens in Latin. The progressor is someone who isn't perfect, isn't the sage, but is actively working towards virtue. They're making progress, learning, improving day by day.
And Seneca saw himself as a progressor.
That's certainly how he framed it, especially later in life when defending his wealth and political compromises. He'd say something like, look, I'm not the finished article. I found the right path late. I'm still struggling, but I'm trying to point the way for others based on what I've learned.
Okay, that makes sense as a framework. And a big part of that progress is managing emotions, right? He wrote a whole book on anger, Daira.
Yes, and he took a very strong stance. Unlike some other philosophers or just common Roman attitudes, Seneca completely rejected the idea that anger could be useful.
You mean like anger motivating soldiers in battle or righteous indignation driving reform?
He said no. Any perceived benefit is temporary and illusory. He used this great analogy. Sometimes people benefit from a shipwreck, right? They get washed ashore somewhere unexpectedly good.
Okay, unlikely, but possible.
But, he argued, no sane person tries to increase their chances of being shipwrecked just because there's a tiny possibility of a good outcome. Anger is the same. It might give you a momentary burst of energy, but the long-term damage it does to your judgment, your peace of mind, your relationships, it far outweighs any fleeting benefit.
So what did he see anger as then, if not a tool?
He saw it as a kind of temporary madness, a reckless, unbridled impulse over which reason has no authority. Once it takes hold, you're not thinking clearly anymore.
So how does the progressor, the person striving for virtue, stop it from taking hold? Can you even stop feeling anger?
That's where he makes a really interesting distinction. He talks about first movements. These are the immediate, involuntary physical reactions you have to something startling or threatening.
Like if someone insults you, your heart might race, you might flush.
Exactly. Or your palms sweat, your jaw tightens. Seneca says these are natural, like reflexes. They happen before the emotion proper kicks in. They aren't anger itself or fear itself.
So the emotion only comes after that initial reaction.
Right. The emotion itself, anger, fear, whatever, requires a judgment. Your mind has to assent to the idea that something truly bad has happened and that a strong reaction is warranted. Fear involves the judgment, I must flee. Anger involves the judgment, I must attack.
So the Stoic technique is to catch it in that gap between the physical reaction and the mental judgment.
Precisely. You can't stop the heart racing, but you can refuse to endorse the judgment that says, this insult requires furious retaliation. You pause, you bring reason back online, and you say, okay, that happened, it's unpleasant, but I won't let it drive me to irrational action.
That must take incredible practice, especially in a high-stakes environment like Nero's court.
No doubt. But that ability to control the internal judgment, regardless of what's happening externally, that's the core of Stoic resilience. It leads directly to how they view adversity.
Which isn't necessarily as bad.
Correct. For Seneca, external events, losing your job, getting sick, falling out of favor with the emperor, even being exiled, they aren't inherently good or bad. They are indifference. Their only real significance is as opportunities to exercise virtue.
So don't rush to judge something as a disaster.
Exactly. Avoid that hasty judgment. Instead, the Stoic approach is to see adversity as a training exercise.
Like an athlete training.
Yes, he loved that analogy. Think of a wrestler. If they only ever fight weak opponents, they never really develop their skill or strength, do they?
No, they need challenges.
Right. A tough match, maybe even a loss, that's what proves their mettle and forces them to get better. Seneca says life is the same. Facing difficulties, whether it's Nero's moods or political attacks, is like stepping into the ring with a tough opponent. It's a chance to demonstrate your character, your resilience, your virtue. Hardship is the gymnasium of the soul, basically.
Welcoming adversity, that's a tough mindset.
It is. And he suggested a technique to help cultivate it, a
Right.
negative visualization.
Which sounds, well, negative,
Yeah.
like being a pessimist.
Yeah. It sounds like it, but it's actually meant to be therapeutic. It's not about dwelling on the bad, but about mentally preparing for it. Seneca advised actively contemplating the loss of things you value.
Like what? Your wealth,
Yeah.
your health, people you love.
All of it. Spend some time thinking, what if I lost my fortune? What if I became ill? What if this loved one died? What if I lost my position? What if I had to face death myself?
Why would you do that? Isn't that just morbid?
The idea is that by mentally rehearsing loss, you rob misfortune of its power to shock and devastate you when it actually happens. As Seneca put it, grief hits hardest those who didn't see it coming.
So if you've already contemplated losing your job, when you actually get fired, it's still painful, but it's not an utter catastrophe that shatters your worldview.
That's the goal. You've acknowledged it as a possibility within the natural course of events. It helps you maintain perspective and remember that the only thing truly secure, the only thing truly yours is your inner character, your spirit. External things come and go.
Which, of course, brings us right back to Seneca's own life, his immense wealth, his luxurious villas, his political power. How did he reconcile that with this philosophy of detachment from externals?
Yeah.
This is the hypocrisy charge, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it was thrown at him during his lifetime, too. How can the man writing thatch makes just as good a roof as gold be living under the metaphorical gold roof, accumulating a fortune?
It does seem like a massive contradiction. How did he defend himself? Or did he?
He did try to address it, particularly in his letters. He didn't argue that wealth was bad in itself. For Stoics, wealth is a preferred indifferent, meaning all else being equal, it's preferable to poverty, but it has no bearing on your actual virtue or happiness.
So it's okay to have it, as long as you're not attached to it, as long as you be okay losing it.
That's the argument. The Stoics should use wealth if it comes their way, use it wisely, perhaps even generously, but be completely prepared mentally and emotionally to lose it all without despair.
That's a very fine line to walk, especially when you're actively involved in acquiring and managing that wealth through things like money lending, which Seneca did.
It is a fine line, and critics then and now argue he fell on the wrong side of it, that he was rationalizing his enjoyment of luxury. He certainly seemed to enjoy the benefits of his position.
So how did he justify, say, retiring from Nero's court? Was that seen as abandoning his post, or was it framed differently?
When he finally did manage to withdraw from public life, largely forced out by Nero's growing hostility, he framed it not as giving up or becoming inactive. He argued it was a way to be of use to more people.
By writing his philosophy.
Exactly. He said he was trading the temporary, often frustrating business of day-to-day politics for something more enduring. He claimed he spent his nights studying and writing, creating these philosophical guides like formula for successful medications, he called them.
Curing his own sores and offering the cures to others.
Yes, that was the metaphor. He positioned his writing as a form of public service with a much wider, longer-lasting impact than trying to manage Nero. He presented himself as someone who'd figured things out late after much wandering and was now sharing the map.
A flawed guide, a progressor, showing the way.
That seems to be the image he cultivated. Whether you buy it fully is another question, but it's consistent with the Stoic framework he built.
Okay, let's layer in another Stoic idea that might help explain his political actions, or at least how he might have understood them. This concept of acting with reservation.
Yes, this is really important for understanding how a Stoic engages with the world, especially in politics or any sphere where outcomes are uncertain.
So what does it mean, practically?
It means you commit fully to the action that reason tells you is right, but you remain detached from the outcome because the outcome is ultimately not under your control.
Can you give an example?
The classic one is the archer. The skilled archer does everything in their power to shoot well. They aim carefully, judge the wind, draw the bowstring correctly, release smoothly. All of that effort is within their control.
Okay.
But once the arrow leaves the bow, a sudden gust of wind might blow it off course. That gust of wind is outside the archer's control. The Stoic, like the archer, focuses entirely on the quality of their attempt, on doing their part virtuously. They accept the final result, whatever it is, with equanimity.
So, applying that to Seneca, his virtuous action was trying to advise Nero, trying to promote good governance, trying to restrain the bad impulses.
Right. That was his effort, his shot.
But Nero's own character, his paranoia, the political currents, Those were the wind that Seneca couldn't control.
Exactly. His moral worth lay in the attempt and the rational effort made, not in whether he ultimately succeeded in turning Nero into a wise ruler, which was clearly impossible. Epictetus, another great Stoic thinker who came a bit after Seneca, used a different metaphor. Life is like a play. Yeah. He said, you are an actor in a drama of such sort as the author chooses. Your task is to act well the given part, but to choose it belongs to another.
So Seneca was cast in the role of advisor to the tyrant. He didn't choose the role, but his job was to play that part as virtuously as possible.
That's the idea. Use reason, act justly, try to steer things in a better direction within the confines of the role you've been given, and accept the final curtain when it comes.
That idea of acting with reservation, focusing on the effort rather than the outcome, it feels very relevant today too, doesn't it?
I think so. Think about people working for social change or political reform, or even just trying to do good in a difficult corporate environment. You pour your energy into it, you try your best.
But you often face huge obstacles, setbacks, maybe even outright failure.
Right. Acting with reservation means you find your integrity in the quality of your effort, in knowing you did what you rationally could, even if the world doesn't change overnight, or the specific outcome you hoped for doesn't materialize. It prevents burnout and despair, in theory.
So Seneca, despite the compromises, might have seen his entire political career through this lens, doing the best he could in an impossible role, accepting the outcome.
It's a plausible interpretation of how he might have justified it to himself, using his own philosophical toolkit. And that outcome eventually required the ultimate test of his principles.
The end finally came in AD 65, didn't it, with the Pisonian conspiracy?
Yes. After years of navigating the treacherous waters of Nero's court, Seneca got caught up in a major plot to assassinate the emperor.
Was he actually involved? The sources seem a bit unclear.
They are. Some suggest he knew about it. Others even claim that some of the conspirators planned to make Seneca emperor after killing Nero. Whether he actively participated or was just seen as a potential beneficiary, we don't know for sure.
The irony, though, the philosopher of detachment possibly being lined up for supreme power or facing death because of it?
It's intense. But once the conspiracy was discovered, Nero's reaction was swift and brutal. Seneca was implicated, and Nero ordered him to commit suicide.
And we have a pretty detailed account of his death, thanks to the historian Tacitus.
We do. Tacitus describes the scene vividly. The order comes via a military tribune, Gavius Silvanus.
And Silvanus himself is hesitant.
Deeply. Tacitus notes that Silvanus went to Seneca's villa but couldn't bring himself to deliver the sentence directly. He reported back to Nero that Seneca showed no fear, no sadness, just composure.
Why was Silvanus so conflicted?
Because he was actually one of the conspirators himself. He was caught in this terrible bind.
Wow. So he goes to his superior, Fenius Rufus, the commander of the guard.
Who is also one of the conspirators, and Rufus just tells him, obey the emperor. Tacitus uses this to comment on the paralysis, the ineluctable weakness that gripped even those plotting against Nero when faced with his direct command.
So Silvanus still couldn't do it.
No. He ended up sending a lower-ranking officer, a centurion, to actually give Seneca the fatal order.
And how did Seneca react when he finally got the news?
According to Tacitus, with complete calm. No panic, no pleading. He accepted it as inevitable. He comforted his distraught wife Paulina and his friends.
And his method of death.
Yes.
The classic Roman way.
Yes, cutting his veins. But Tacitus notes it was a slow process. Because Seneca was old and lived austerely, his blood flowed very slowly.
So it wasn't quick.
Not at all. He apparently kept talking, even dictating some final thoughts to his scribes, though those notes are lost to us. To speed things up, he asked for poison hemlock, like Socrates, but that didn't work quickly either.
So what finally happened?
He was carried into a hot bath. The idea was the steam and heat would hasten the bleeding and suffocate him. And that's eventually how he died, surrounded by steam, still apparently composed.
A very deliberate philosophical end. Almost a performance of his stoicism.
It certainly reads that way. It was the final demonstration that while Nero could command his death, he couldn't command his inner state. His mind, his character, remained his own.
And Tacitus adds one final detail that seems to confirm Seneca's sincerity, right? Something about his funeral arrangements.
Yes, it's a crucial point. Tacitus mentions that Seneca had, long before this, given instructions for a simple burial, without any elaborate rites or ceremonies.
Why is that significant?
Because, Tacitus argues, it showed that, even in the height of his wealth and power, he was thinking of his life's close. He wasn't just talking the talk about detachment from worldly things and preparation for death. He had actually made practical arrangements reflecting those principles years earlier.
So for Tacitus, that was proof his Stoicism wasn't just a facade put on at the end.
Exactly. The life was full of contradictions, sure, the compromises were real, but the death in this account seems to authenticate the underlying philosophical commitment.
So looking back at Seneca's whole life,
Mhm.
what's the key takeaway for us, for the listener?
I think it shows that living a philosophical life, or trying to, doesn't necessarily mean withdrawing from the world, from politics, from wealth, from difficulty. It can mean engaging with all of that, but striving constantly to maintain control over your inner judgments, your character.
Using the external chaos as the training ground.
Precisely. It's about being a progressor. Recognizing you won't be perfect, you'll face contradictions, you'll make compromises, but you keep committing to reason, to virtue, to managing your inner world, regardless of the external storms.
The goal isn't perfection, but the commitment to the process. Like the archer focusing on the shot, not just the target.
That's a good way to put it. Seneca lived and died embodying that struggle. Even if the wind blows your arrow off course, the quality of your effort, your intention, still matters.
And just as a final thought, something for you to consider. Seneca's mind wasn't just grappling with Nero's court. His intellectual reach went much further, didn't it?
Absolutely. There's this remarkable passage, not from his philosophy, but from one of his tragedies, Medea.
What does it say?
He's writing about the progress of exploration and seafaring, and he
Right.
predicts this future age. He writes, let me get the gist. An age will come, in later years, when ocean will loose the bonds of things, and earth's great breadth will stand revealed. Tethys, the sea goddess, will disclose new worlds, and Thule, often representing the northernmost known land, no longer be last among lands.
He's predicting discovery beyond the known world. Novos orbs, new worlds.
Exactly. And incredibly, this passage was picked up centuries later during the Renaissance. Explorers and scholars saw it as a prophecy. Christopher Columbus's own son, Ferdinand, actually quoted it in relation to his father's voyages to America.
That's amazing. So even while trapped in the deadly politics of Rome, Seneca's mind was reaching across oceans and centuries.
It seems so. It's a powerful reminder that even when someone is deeply entangled in the immediate, often ugly realities of power, their intellectual vision can transcend it all. Seneca's legacy is complicated for sure, but his reach was undeniably vast.